Hey y'all, in the gospel this week, what if Jesus is the one knocking? We often read Luke 11 as a call to persistent prayer, but what if the real surprise is who's at the door? Let's try a fresh take on a familiar parable. Let's discover how Jesus comes to us not just with answers, but with need, love, and power. He knocks for us, carries our hunger, and invites us to rise. Come check out this week's message. So today's gospel is about how to get what you want through prayer, right? Hold up. In asking that question, I can hear this voice from a movie where one of the characters asks a group a question sort of like this about something else. A leader in the group quickly says, "Don't answer that. It's a trap." Well, he was right. This week, I learned something by looking at Jesus' parable a little differently. It's a good idea to look at a parable from different angles. I think Jesus has a tendency, because he is a fantastic storyteller or parable constructor, to lay in some extra meaning. That could be tough when you've heard a meaning or interpretation ever since you were sitting in the little chairs in Sunday school. We can be too quick to go, "Oh yeah, I know what that one means." Well, the most interesting thing you can do with a parable is to roll the roles around. And let's see where I saw something interesting this week. What if Jesus is the one knocking? We usually read the parable in Luke 11 as being the ones knocking on God's door, asking for help, because it comes right after Jesus teaches how to pray. But Jesus, with his art form of seemingly simple stories, has set another trap, a really good one. I just don't think that Jesus is telling a story about the idea that God needs to be bugged to get our daily bread. But what if Jesus tells this story not just to invite us to be persistent askers, but to reveal himself as the shameless midnight knocking neighbor? Think about it. He's the one who comes into our quiet, private lives and shatters the illusion of self-sufficiency and self-reliance. He shows up in the dark, uninvited, asking if we have enough to share. He knocks and knocks and knocks over and over, maybe even annoyingly, trying to get us to wake up. Do we find ourselves wanting to say, "For crying out loud, I'm in bed. The door's locked. I can't get up"? In the Greek, in the Bible, it actually says, "I don't have the power or energy or ability to get up." Let's hold on to that one for just a little and come back to it. You see, I get the image of maybe me lying in bed, punching the pillow, pulling it over my head, trying to drown out the sound of the knocking, shouting into the darkness, "Don't you know it's 3 a.m.? Go away." But Jesus doesn't. Jesus is not afraid of breaking social expectations, of waking people up, of crossing boundaries. He's done that all throughout the gospel. He's not the God who needs to be coaxed into generosity. He's the neighbor who comes shamelessly, boldly, in love, risking rejection to offer us the chance to participate in something way bigger than ourselves. So let's take a moment and think about having that kind of neighbor or friend. You're hungry, and he sets out for you at 3 a.m., knocking on doors persistently, annoyingly, refusing to accept your hunger as something that we just can't do anything about right now. What a friend we have in Jesus. Maybe someone should write a song about that. Well, as you may know, someone did. His name was Joseph Scriven, and he was an Irish-born man who immigrated to Canada in the late 1800s. Shortly before he was to be married in 1843, his fiancée accidentally drowned. He was devastated and left Ireland and eventually settled near Port Hope, Ontario. Well, years later, he fell in love again, only for his second fiancée to die of illness before their wedding. One out of these losses, his faith matured and developed and deepened. He was known for helping the poor and the sick. He became known for giving away possessions and doing manual labor for those in need. It was in 1855 that he wrote the poem called Pray Without Ceasing. He didn't intend for it to be published because he had written it to his mom in a private letter for spiritual encouragement. Well, the poem later became known as What a Friend We Have in Jesus, and was eventually set to music by Charles C. Converse in 1868. I didn't know the origin of the hymn, but I wanted to look it up because it just seemed like it would be fun to play around with and make some new verses that fit the parable for today. Now, let's face it, my verses aren't polished in poetry, but they do speak to the point and with an attempt to highlight our mission, Jesus' love for us, and how we are empowered to action. I wrote, what a friend who knocks at midnight, won't take silence for a no. He refuses to quit banging, so we know that we're not alone. He's the friend that sees our hunger. He's the bread that won't let go. Shameless love that keeps on knocking just to feed our hungry souls. Sometimes we see our neighbor hungry and we feel we cannot rise. Jesus tirelessly keeps on knocking, so we hear our neighbor's cries. Still he waits with patient mercy, the Spirit's power he brings near, helping us to feed our neighbor and wipe away their every tear. I think the roles in Jesus' parables are intentionally blurry. Sometimes we're the knockers, sometimes we're the ones asleep, locked behind doors. Sometimes Jesus is both the one knocking and the bread being asked for, because he is our daily bread. For he is the sustenance we didn't think we had. He is the midnight interruption that turns into a miracle. So, what if Jesus is the knocking neighbor? And what if every time we hear that knock in our conscience, or in the cries of someone else's need, or in the still small voice inviting us to risk again? What if it's him? It is what he taught us in the sheep-goats parable. When you see the least of these, you see me. So given that, do we open the door? Or do we try to keep the locks in place, hiding behind the excuses of time, tradition, social convention, forgetting that what's on the other side isn't just someone in need, but someone bearing life? Now here's the good news. Jesus doesn't just knock on our door. He knocks on other people's doors when we are the ones in need. He goes out into the night, carrying our hunger, our heartbreak, our prayer. When the pain is too deep to name, when prayer feels impossible, when you just can't ask again, he says, don't worry, I'm going to knock for you. What kind of friend does that? It's the kind who carries your need like it's his own. The kind who won't stop until help comes. So when you hear a knock this week, whether it's an actual request, an interruption, or a tug in your gut, or even just the awareness that someone else is in need, consider who's really at the door. Don't panic if you feel like the one stuck in bed, powerless or unprepared. Maybe you'll feel like saying, I can't get up. Realize that's okay. Jesus has already gotten up, out of bed, out of a tomb. He doesn't come to burden us, but to empower us, to knock. Jesus has already gotten up, out of bed, out of the tomb. He doesn't come to burden you, but to empower you, to knock for you, He brings the bread. He brings the Spirit. He brings the power to rise and unlock the door. Amen.